Hello, my name is Duncan Taylor and I'm presenting today from Sydney in New South Wales, Australia, and I will be presenting on my experience with recuperative thickening in the Australian context. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank and acknowledge my co-authors, Conrad Pretorius and Ursin Kaserga from GHD in the US and Laura Roth from GHD in Sydney. In the presentation today, I'll briefly introduce the recuperative thickening process, provide a short overview of sludge rheology, provide a bit of a discussion of design considerations principally focused on rheological properties of sludge, and then provide a brief summary of some of the outcomes that we've achieved at full scale. Also, draw your attention to Frank, who was a friend of ours on one of our design projects. We were based on site, and Frank is an echidna, which is a monotreme for anyone who would like to look that up later. So what is recuperative thickening? It's a relatively simple process where some sludge or a side stream of sludge is withdrawn from the digestion process, thickened mechanically. The thickened sludge is returned to the process and the filtrate is generally returned to the head of works or to the main treatment process. Recuperative thickening is suitable for implementation on any number of mesophilic anaerobic digester process arrangements. For example, a relatively common arrangement certainly in Australia is two-stage digestion. Recuperative thickening can be implemented on such a system by taking the sludge stream from the secondary digester through the recuperative process and then having the thickened sludge returned upstream or to the primary digestion stage. And what is it that recuperative thickening adds to the conventional mesophilic process? Well, essentially it's the ability to decouple the sludge retention time from the hydraulic retention time. By thickening the sludge by this side stream arrangement, solids are retained in the process for longer than under a conventional approach, and therefore you get a benefit of higher SRT at a given load and a given process volume that's available. So why would an authority or an agency look to implement recuperative thickening? Essentially, two reasons. First being to increase digestion capacity, and the second being to increase digester SRT, as just discussed, both of which can be achieved with the recuperative thickening process and without the construction of new structures or new process volume. These outcomes can be achieved either as single outcomes, so simply an increase in capacity or simply an increase in SRT at a given capacity, or they can be combined and a higher capacity can be achieved in the process and a higher SRT. And this is an approach that has been achieved, or an outcome that has been achieved on a number of projects in Australia. So there's a number of parameters that obviously need to be considered in the design of the recuperative system. As I mentioned in the introduction, I'll be focusing on those related to the rheological properties of the sludge, as there are a number of systems that are impacted by the change in the sludge properties that occurs when recuperative thickening is implemented. So a brief overview of sludge rheology. Sewage sludges typically are non-Newtonian in nature, especially as the dry solids concentration increases above, say, 2 to 3% dry solids. Features of non-Newtonian fluids, a couple of common features of sewage sludges are that the viscosity can vary with shear rate, and also there can be a yield stress observed. So that is a stress that needs to be overcome simply to get the fluid to move or to flow in the first place. There's a number of models available as shown here on this slide. Typically we've found that the Herschel-Bulkley model is often the most appropriate for sewage sludges. It combines the yield stress of the Bingham plastic model with the varying viscosity at lower shear rates that is provided in the power law. So in order to determine the rheological properties for a given sludge, it's necessary to do some lab work. This shows typical output of rheological analysis conducted on a particular sludge over a range of dry solids concentrations. The trend lines here show the Bingham plastic fit for each of the runs. However, it can be seen here quite clearly that as the shear rate drops, there's a curvature to the data, particularly observable in the higher solids concentration sets of results. And that varying viscosity is indicative of a Herschel-Bulkley type sludge, because you can see also that there is an observable yield stress, and so the power law wouldn't be appropriate, as the yield stress can be quite important in determining the system function and design requirements. So that's a very brief overview of sludge rheology and the analysis that's undertaken to determine rheological properties. Just move on to a bit of a discussion on why rheology is important to consider when designing these systems. So one of the most important lessons that we've learnt over a number of years on these projects is that it's really imperative, if at all possible, to collect site-specific rheological information. So this chart here shows both data collected from fieldwork and lab testing, and data that was used in a previous project at the same site for the upgrade of the biosolids system. So the site-specific data is digested sludge at 5% dry solids without any polymer addition, and the design rheology was actually sludge, theoretical sludge at 6% dry solids. And what we can see here is that while there's a similar yield stress for the two sets of data, there's a very large difference in the viscosity, and that difference in viscosity would have a significant impact on the design of multiple systems. Those systems include the digester mixing, various pumping systems, and also the digester heating systems. So heat exchanger capacity is obviously significantly affected by the flow regime of the sludge side, and as the viscosity increases in the sludge, the flow on the sludge side is more likely to become laminar in nature. This laminar flow regime would result in a very significant reduction in the heat transfer capacity for the heat exchanger, and would lead to the need to either upgrade the existing systems if they're being retained, or if it's a brownfield project, or the need to add supplementary or additional heat exchange capacity. And that was the case on one of the projects that I was involved in several years ago, where a very large additional heat exchanger was required and was in fact installed on the raw sludge stream as opposed to on a recirculation stream from the digester itself. As I mentioned before, the capacity of the sludge pumping systems on site, whether they're existing or new systems that are being designed as part of an upgrade, their operating requirements are significantly affected by the sludge rheology. This can include the suitability of existing pumps, the suitability of existing pipe work for the new system operating pressures, and ensuring that new systems that are designed to operate in the correct regions. We've demonstrated through some full-scale trial work that provided site-specific rheological data is collected, provided the correct fluid model is applied, and that the rheological properties are determined accurately from the model and from the data, that the head losses that are calculated during design can be within 5% of those actually observed on site. So that indicates the power of making sure that the properties of the sludge that will actually be handled are well understood. Finally, briefly, just touching on some performance outcomes. So this is just a quick demonstration of the improvement in SRT that can be obtained at Plant B in Australia. This was operating at a sludge age of around 12 days prior to the recuperative thickening upgrade, and without the addition of any new process volume, no new digesters. You can clearly see from this chart that a significant improvement in the SRT was achieved, and the design target in this case was around 30 days. At that same plant, with that increase in SRT, we also observed a significant increase in the gas production rate pre and post the upgrade. So in this digester here, which was digester 5 at the time, hadn't been refurbished, the 50th percentile flow over a significant period of time was around 11,000 cubic metres a day. And in digester 3, which was brought online as a refurbished digester around and the time that digester 5 was then taken offline, the gas production from that digester post the upgrade was observed around 16,000 cubic metres a day, so roughly a 50% increase in flow. This was really just an observation at the time, and there wasn't a significant investigation effort made to fully understand this, but it was a consistent observation over a significant period of time. In relation to that increase in flow, one thing we did go back and look at was the modelling that was undertaken during the design. This is ADM1 modelling again of the recuperative thickening process during design. And what can be observed here is that as the sludge age drops below the design point of 30 days, there's a relatively steep decline in the methane yield. So pre the upgrade, when the digesters were operating at 12 days or maybe even lower, it is quite likely that the methane yield was significantly lower, and that this could provide a reasonable explanation for that increase in the biogas flow that was observed. Finally, one of the other benefits that recuperative thickening can provide, and this benefit is really provided via the increase in SRT that can be achieved, and that is a significant reduction and a very stable outcome in terms of biosolids cake odour potential. In this chart here, the odour potential is represented by the total volatile organic sulphur compound concentration measured in the headspace above a biosolid sample, and the analysis is conducted at intervals over a 10-day period to represent storage both on site and at the place of disposal or reuse. There's one result here for the plant B pre-upgrade biosolids cake, and then there's several results for plant B, C and D. So C and D are two other treatment plants that we had experience with, and these samples are all from plants with recuperative thickening implemented. And it's quite clear that by achieving the 30-day or greater SRT through the use of recuperative thickening, that the cake odour potential is very stable in general and around an order of magnitude below that observed at plant B prior to the upgrade. So just in summary, there's a number of benefits that recuperative thickening can provide. Essentially, it offers the potential to be a very cost-effective way of increasing either the digestion process capacity, so the solids load that can be applied to the process, and or the SRT at which the process can be operated. This can be achieved without construction of new process units, or new process volume. As a result of being able to increase the SRT, the process can also provide a significant reduction in cake odour potential, and this can provide significant benefit to the community that both surrounds the treatment plant and the community through which dewatered biosolids may be transported to the disposal or reuse location, and if being reused, can provide benefit to the community at the reuse location. And finally, there is evidence that if the implementation of recuperative thickening involves a significant increase in sludge age from a very low sludge age prior to the upgrade, then there may be a reasonable increase in biogas production realised as well. So thanks everyone for listening. I hope that the paper or the presentation itself was somewhat informative. There is more information in the paper, so please feel free to read that, and also feel free to contact either myself or one of my co-authors if any of this is of any interest or you'd like to discuss anything further. Thank you very much.